This is the Authority Company Podcast, conversations with leaders that are designing the future. Hola, I'm Joe Pardavila, and I love underdog stories. Rocky, Rudy, Hoosiers, you name it, I dig it. And today, I've got one for you. It's courtesy of Quang X, Pham, the author of the new book, Underdog Nation, Zero in on Effort and Results for Success. Quang is a mega successful biopharmaceutical entrepreneur, but he wasn't born on third base. He's a refugee from Vietnam who came to the States shortly after the war ended, grew up in Southern California, became a U.S. Marine, and went on an incredible journey that's just getting started. Quang Pham, welcome to the podcast. How are you?
Joe, good to be here. Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. You're a very busy man, jet setting. You're talking to me from your hotel room, so I appreciate you carving a little time. We're talking after your book launch, so congratulations on all the success so far. What's it feel now to give birth to the book, by the way? Let's start there. Like, what are the feelings like going through you right now?
Well, I'm giving it birth to a book before, so this is my second time. So, you learn the ropes a little bit second time around. The writing, the isolation, the editing part, and obviously the final product. The book, the dust jacket, and just holding it in your hand. So I think the Forbes book team has done a tremendous job. I'm very happy with the product, and so far early praises and commentary from friends and other business associates who got advanced copies have been very positive. So very happy overall.
Awesome. Well, let's start with the fact that, you're a refugee from Vietnam, and my mom was a refugee from Cuba who came over in the 60s. And there's something about, and speaking in broad general terms, as you'll get to know, Quang, is the idea of like this DNA of a refugee and the ability to succeed and to survive, the first step, survive and then succeed at all costs. Is that what's been ingrained in you as well? Because I feel like anyone who's been through the struggles that my mother's been through, or you and your family have been through, there's something about going through that process and ending up on the other side a much stronger person.
Well, you're right, Joe. I think it's that common bond of having to flee, whether it's communism, oppression. There is a difference between a refugee and an immigrant in terms of an economic immigrant. And I think the fine people of Cuba in the late 50s and early 60s and the people of South Vietnam, my former country, we both faced communism and a way of life that some of our family members and our parents and our grandparents made that decision. I think the common bond is we got to come to America. And that's where the tremendous opportunities to really start over. And the theme of my book is called Underdog Nation. The theme is, what's it like to come to America as an underdog? You're not coming here as a prince or a king. You're coming in, you're starting at the bottom, but it's the best place to start because it's the only place that gives you every opportunity to succeed, including education, economic opportunities. And for me, I had to give back something, and that something was to serve my country as soon as I became a citizen. And that service was in the Marines. One more note, Joe. It's a small world. My late father came to the United States in the late 50s to train as a pilot, a military pilot, courtesy of the U.S. Air Force. And 5 of his classmates happened to be Cuban pilots. Were in this classmate. So it's a very small world, and a number of those pilots ended up flying in the Bay of Pigs. And so, the world is very small, and the connection. We didn't know it back then between the Cubans and the South Vietnamese go back a long ways, including in my family.
Wow, that's great. No, that's great. And so so as you know, with refugees, there's that sponsorship thing where you have to have someone essentially vouch for you. And so my mother's family had someone vouch for them in New Jersey, which again is kind of the incredible like serendipitous of like the fate. Like you don't know, like you just have no idea where you may end up. My mother ended up in New Jersey, met my dad, raised a family from like the ground up, had a couple sons, and the rest is pretty much history. How about what was yours like? Where did you end up when you first came here? And one of those things like, what the hell is going on here?
Well, I think as an adult, I learned a lot about the Vietnam War through the American historian lens, through the military historian lens, and also through Hollywood. And so from our lens, the war ended abruptly. We lived in South Vietnam. We just thought the war would go on forever. And then growing up, my thought was I would become an adult and join the service and keep fighting the communists forever. And then the war ended abruptly 50 years ago this month. And so when America evacuated us, and we were part of less than 1% of the South Vietnamese population that got out in 1975. And there are different waves, just like the Cubans came in different waves, right? Starting the late 50s, 60s, and through the Mariel boat lift in 1980. And so we had to get sponsored. We went to a refugee camp in Arkansas when the war ended and we were airlifted out. And so we waited there for a few months, and an American family in Southern California. And back then, it was a tough time in this country in the 70s with the recession and inflation. And so the government didn't want all the refugees to end up in one place. That would take too much of an economic toll. They wanted to spread us out. So I think the number of church organizations, religious groups like the Lutheran services to Catholic charities helped resettle many of us. But we were sponsored by a U.S. American family in Southern California, about an hour north of downtown LA.
Wow. And so as a kid coming from the tumult of Vietnam to then the tumult of America, like you said, the 70s was not one of the brightest moments. How old were you when you kind of set up roots in Los Angeles?
I was 10. I had just finished the 5th grade in Saigon, the former capital of South Vietnam, now called Ho Chi Minh City.
And so you're 10 years old. What was your self-awareness level like? Because at 10, I could probably say I was an idiot. I had no idea what was going on in my life. At 10, were you aware of how difficult, first of all, like how hard it was for your parents to get you over here? And then at that point, trying to start anew during a very tumultuous time in American history.
I think growing up in the war, you grow up very fast. So all of the kids that we grew up there, going to school, bombings, getting into the bomb shelter at night. And my father was a South Vietnamese Air Force pilot, so he would go off to missions sometimes and come back. Because Vietnam was a small country, and so we grew up very fast. And it was when we landed in the United States, the biggest difference was the culture and the temperature. It was cold. In Southern California, it was in the 60s, and it was cold. I think the culture, it was something that the kids, they didn't know who I was. Everybody thought we were Chinese, and they were doing the kung fu Bruce Lee thing. So I'm like, wow, they think I'm a movie star. And it was sports that got me integrated into the early years of the American society. It was Little League baseball, and on to high school, and playing basketball and practicing English. We never changed our name, but in our household, we spoke Vietnamese when we got home, but outside the household, it was 100% English. And my father didn't come over. He stayed behind, and he went to prison camps, the communist labor camps, for 12 years. So it was just mom and 3 sisters and myself. And mom always said something to us every time we got in trouble or faced difficulties. She always said, look, your dad got you the freedom to America. If you fail, you would be very disappointed. That's all it took for us to make sure we stayed, on the right path. And we were very fortunate. There were a lot of kind people, besides the ribbing and the joking and the mocking of the Chinese language and making fun of our names. Overall, it was as good as it can get. I couldn't imagine going anywhere else. And we should logically have gone to Paris, because French was our second language, and we had aunts and uncles and probably 10 cousins in Paris by the time Saigon fell in April 1975.
Wow. Well, for a couple things there, I would say first, Vietnamese mothers sound like Cuban mothers. They love the guilt trip. So we have in common. And also, Quang, what lightweight. You were cold in the 60s? My poor mother from Cuba had to come up into New Jersey, freezing your ass off, and you're in 60-degree weather being cold. Come on, Quang.
No, Vietnam near the equator. Southern California in June was cold. You got the marine layer, the layer doesn't get clear till 1 o'clock in the afternoon.
Oh, that's funny. All right. So one thing that you did that, I have a lot of pride and respect for people to join the military. Like looking back again, at 10 years old, I was an idiot. At 18, there was no chance in hell that I would ever see myself in the military. Was it a lot of, obviously pride of being, embracing your new home country, but was it following your father's footsteps? What was the motivation to join the armed forces?
Yeah, so for the first 10 years, I had no inkling, no dream that the United States would trust, a 5'8", 135-pound kid from Vietnam to fly, a jet, helicopter, or plane. I became a citizen after 9 years, and I was going to school in UCLA in Los Angeles, and I ran across a recruiter, and he heard my family history, and he said, "Look, if you want to serve your country, this is the time to do it. You can always go to business later." And it brought me back to my childhood dream, which was to follow my father's footstep, to be a military pilot, because that's all I knew growing up. But I felt a sense of obligation, because there was, there I was 10 years in, getting an education, got my citizenship. Life was pretty good. I thought about all the kids who didn't make it out of Vietnam. A lot of my peers, I never knew what happened to them. Then I had some friends whose fathers, whose uncles were Vietnam vets, and some of them didn't make it out either. And so, it just hit me sometime after I got my citizenship that, wow, you know, maybe I should do this. Maybe I should do this before I go into the private sector.
Wow. Wow. That's great. Like I said, super respect and super props for all of you that do it. And so then, I often joke on these podcasts, Quang, is that my family very much that immigrant style of like work for the man. Like, I think there's two kinds of like immigrants slash refugees who are the ones that want to have like that 9 to 5, get paid every 2 weeks. And then there's the psychopaths like yourself, Quang, who want to go into entrepreneurship. Tell me about that wiring of deciding to do things outside of the box. Obviously, you were already breaking the box when you came to the States, but like following that entrepreneurial spirit right out of the military.
Well, I think it takes a certain, risk taker to fly helicopters at night off amphibious carriers. And so I think my risk tolerance was very high after the Marines, after gone to the Persian Gulf War and flying Marines off the ship in the Indian Ocean and in the Persian Gulf the second time. So I had no fear of taking risk in life or in business by the time I got out of service. I think in our society, the Vietnamese refugee, they all wanted us to be doctors, dentists, pharmacists. So I went in, a lot of my mother's friends and our friends from Vietnam said, well, what are you doing? You know, who joins the military when you have a degree from UCLA? And so I was never the guy that follows the crowd. I did, and I was very happy I did what I did. But the entrepreneurial spirit was, I did spend 5 years after the service in big pharmaceutical companies and biotech companies. And I think after the military, I joined the sales force and did very well in sales. But I also saw that, a big organization has structures, and it's got rank, it's got order. Just like you can't be a general in 5 years. You can't be a VP at a big company in 5 years. And so by the third year, I was getting itchy. And so the dot-com era was coming around in Southern California. And so in 1999, 2000, I decided to leave a big biotech company. And at that time, founded a company in the early internet era called mydrugrep.com, and it immediately raised 5 million and raised, a lot more money to follow. So it was during the dot-com era where I knew 5 years of business experience. It was the right timing, and it was the right risk profile. I did have a family. I was single. I was going to grad school and working, and I had served my country, and I had some money in the bank. So if there was a time to take a risk, that was it. And I jumped in head first and resigned from the biotech company and never looked back.
Wow. Yeah. I went on to do run multiple companies. And so a question about your leadership, because there's a strange intersection here, because I think there is some, I don't know if it's a stereotype of like Asian style of leadership. Then we have American style leadership, and then you have military leadership. How did those three legs of a stool form to what would become your leadership style?
You're very observant. And there is that Asian-led type of companies, right? And I think a good one is the profile of the NVIDIA, Jensen Huang, right? He's a Taiwanese immigrant, but spent most of his life in the United States. Very fascinating leader and very effective leader. And there's the old world of Asian companies in Asia doing business. And when you meet them, and we meet with plenty from China, Japan, and South Korea, there's a certain way of doing business. And there's the Marine Corps, very top heavy. But what I think the public doesn't know about the Marine Corps is the decision making is very flat on the front lines. And we were taught from day one as officers to make decisions. Whatever you do, don't waffle. Right or wrong, make a decision. Move the troops forward, fly into a zone, just don't circle. And so I think that the number one thing I learned early on was to be able to make decisions. And so I brought an adaptive style from my experience and observing people at the biotech company I worked at, as well as you don't need consensus. You need to listen. But ultimately, if you're the CEO, if you're the chairman, and there are difficult decisions, you need to make a decision and move forward. And you adjust. If it's the wrong decision, that it's just like flying or navigating a ship. If you're off course, make the correction. Don't wait, a day or two or a year. Make the correction as necessary, but make it after you make the decision to move things forward. And that's what we try to focus on, is to move the business forward, move any endeavors forward, because the worst thing you do is you sit back and you let the external factors control you, or you're afraid to make decisions. And I think these are difficult times, and you'll see companies and leaders make decisions despite the fact that they can't control what's going on around them, in the external world.
Yeah, and in the book, you also write about some of your Marine influence and the go no go decision making in terms of navigating high stakes situations. So let's dig into that part of your sort of leadership style. Go no go, for like, I think regular people be like, that sounds scary. Go no go, man. That's blank or you're off the pot kind of thing. Tell me about that sort of mentality in your leadership style.
Yeah, so I learned that in the Marines. We had a go no go, and it's very commonly used. It's just not the Marines. Other organizations used to go no go, and it's like you're never gonna have 100% certainty in financing, in economics setting, and everything is not always lined up. So you have to have, where is that breaking point? Where is it that you're not gonna be willing to take the risk and no go? And you got to determine that beforehand. So I learned that from there. And I think how I applied it to the business side is that the previous company I was in, the Sparrow, we had a finite amount of capital, like most biotech companies. We were early in our fundraising, and we had an opportunity to merge with another company with several products. So we set some go no go criteria. If the price was too high, we're not going to do it. If we're going to give away 90% of our company, we're not going to do it. So I think you have to get that going into a negotiation, and you have to have that to have your decision matrix. So now, not everything is, like you said, life or death, go no go, like it was in the Marines. In the business world, that helps you make decisions. And at the end of the day, we want to make decisions that end up in good effort and producing results, which I talk about going to the ER. I am in healthcare, and I think going to the ER, it's when people panic. They dial 911 and they go to the emergency room. But you can self-diagnose yourself in business and in your life, and look at your decision and your effort and your results. And if you're not getting them, then make the adjustment.
That's great. Good stuff. Something that I think being the kid of immigrants has really informed me is, in good and bad ways, I think. And one of the sort of, like, I want to say negative, is like knowing your worth. And I think for a lot of people that are starting from the ground up, whether they're immigrants or come from, maybe just weren't born on third base, it's this idea of knowing what you're worth. And you write about defining what success means. Was that, I mean, it doesn't sound like you had that issue, but like the idea of like not knowing what you're worth, that you're worthy or worth something or successful. Did you ever have to struggle with that?
Joe, I did. One of the things I learned very much early on was to love what you do until you can do what you love. And we all have dreams. We all have aspirations. We always look forward to the next vacation, the next job, the next promotion. And I always looked at all my jobs, whether it was starting out as a newspaper boy, delivering the Los Angeles Times at 4:30 a.m., or scrubbing toilets and working my way through college. You got to be good at it. because if you do well, if you love what you do at that time, things will open up for you. You're not 1 foot in, 1 foot out. So wherever you are, make the best of it, because then the doors will open. Your current employer, the people you work with, will see it. They're not seeing you dreaming of, getting a promotion or going to another company or changing career. So I always tell my friends, you can have dreams and aspirations, but just keep doing what you do and love it. Love what you do until you can do what you love.
That's awesome. Awesome. And Kwang, I've spoken to hundreds, if not thousands of entrepreneurs over the last 5 years. And one of the things that, and I think it's one of the reasons like I was always afraid of entrepreneurship is, and this is a recurring theme for a lot of them, Kwang, and you may feel this is you start a company, it's yours, it's your baby, like talk about your book, but also no one is going to love that company, that mission, that product that you're selling more than you do. And so when it comes to building a team to fulfill that mission, to create that product, tell me about hiring and finding people that will maybe not equal your passion for said company or product, but will meet you where you are to grow a successful company.
So once again, I think you read from the book. I attribute a lot of my early leadership from the Marines, because that was my first job after graduating from college. And one thing they taught us early was that you always want to have your number two. If the platoon leader goes down, somebody steps up and takes over the platoon. And when we flew helicopters, we had a helicopter pilot in command and a co-pilot. Okay, you got to be able to do that job, because someday the helicopter that's in second in charge, the co-pilot, becomes the helicopter in command. So I've always had that mentality. And so my first startup, I was the only one without an MBA. So I brought in some very, very intelligent folks from Wharton, Harvard, Stanford. I surrounded myself, and the respect for their education and their experience, and it became not my company. It was always our company. It was always replacing I with us and we. It was never my Marine Corps. It was our Marine Corps. It was that my company was our company. And so we always had that in mind, that, hey, if Quang goes off into the sunset or something happened, this would keep going. And everybody had stock. Everybody had skin in the game, and everybody knew that it was our company. And so I think that mentality helps not only build the management team, that there are 2 or 3 people who could take over, but also that they're part of it, just because they're not the founder. This is not a one-person LLC. This is a multi-layered, many investor company. Is all of our company, just like the company we have now, Cadrino. It's our company. It's not mine.
Wow, that's good stuff. And right now it's hard. We like to say, like, we really like to separate politics from life, but I think we all are not dumb or unaware to know that, like, politics touches everything nowadays. Like, there's no way of escaping it, and there is some sort of negative connotation nowadays when you see someone of color, someone a minority, fill a position, and they get labeled with a 3-letter word we're not going to go into now.
Yes.
So how hard and the underdog story that you and your family survived, and then everything it took to get there. But then there's going to be someone from a person you may not know, but may see someone like Quang and be like, oh, this person's a blank. Oh, I see. This person didn't earn what they get. How much harder? Again, I'm avoiding words and sort of triggers and stuff, but like, how much harder is it, do you think, is going to be underdog now, because of all these political layering on top of all that?
Well, I'll show you the experience I had in the mid 80s. And so, it was after the Vietnam War. It was 10 years removed from America's longest and most bloody conflict. And the ending didn't leave a good taste in a lot of people's mouth. And then all the Vietnam War movies came out. Platoon, Full Metal Jacket, and it had the Hollywood angle. So I came into the Marine Corps 11 years after the Vietnam War ended. And yes, there were the 3-word acronym. No, it was called affirmative action. It was called quota. It was called, minority program. And so we had all of that in the service. And at that time, I would think corporate America had some of it as well. There's always people who's going to doubt you. You don't look like us. You have a different name. but there was a standard. And if you met the standard, they backed off. And for me, the standard was when I earned my aviator's wings, went to the Gulf War and flew just like everybody else. And the year after did the same thing. And that trust built, and then all the questions go away. And when I look back now in the entrepreneur world, the business world, it's about effort and results. And when you put in the effort and you produce the results, those questions go away. The doubt goes away. Not 100%, but then you just don't let the detractors get in your way. It's pretty much get the effort in, put it at work, and produce the results. And if you don't have the results, then go back and look at your effort. Are you getting the skills? Are you surrounding yourself? And are you putting forward your best effort at that place at that moment? I can attest to you, all those questions, all the mocking about, are you a product of quota? Because in the 1990s, there were not a lot of minority officers. There were plenty of enlisted in the ranks of the Marine Corps, Hispanics, African Americans, but the majority of officers were Caucasians, especially in the officer corps. So there was a big program, and there were a lot of resentment towards some of us, the African Americans, and there were hardly any Asians in the U.S. military, especially the Marine Corps. So I dealt with all of that. When I went to work for large companies, there were programs towards all of that, but I focused on producing the sales results. I ultimately became the top biotech salesperson, and all of those things go away. Now, I'm not saying you have to do that, but I think effort and results is what we're looking for in the private sector or in government or in the military. And so I didn't ever let those things, detract from my mission. And I would encourage anybody who's in that position to focus on putting in the effort and results. It's a simple concept. Go to the ER.
Love it. Love it. That's good stuff. Thank you. Thank you for indulging me. I know you probably didn't expect to get into this little area, but I think it's important to discuss now because I feel like, Quang, I don't know if you do too. It's like we all think like everything is happening for the first time, but you describing your experience 30, 40 years ago happening now, it's like, wait a minute, didn't we see this movie before? Like, what's going on? Like, why can't we learn from our mistakes? And I think it's just one of those things where it's sort of like that recency bias. We only know what we know that's recently just happened, and everything. And a running joke is like whenever you talk to someone, Quang, you guys say, "Hey, have you heard of this song?" And they're like, "Oh no, that song came out before I was born." I'm like, "Well, yes, but you can listen to music that was made before you were born." So it is funny how people should do a better job of looking back at our history, and they don't have to go that far. It's like you have to go back to World War II history. The 80s and 90s were not too far too that long ago, was it?
But there's been a lot of progress, right here in the state of Florida, right? You have a senator that's of Cuban descent who's now the Secretary of State. When you look at our military, we've had, Chairman Joint Chief of Staff who's African American. I think two of Japanese American. Okay, a friend of mine that escaped Vietnam became a 2-star general in the Army. So there has been progress. That's what you have to look at the challenges, the difficulty, but you have to look at the results. Now, I'm not sure if policy did that or individual effort. I can look at the results. It's a lot better than it was 30 years ago when I was in the service. And you look at the entrepreneurial, which I chose to enter. I saw that in the early 2000s, that you could see young immigrant running .com companies, and they were young. They were not of corporate gray hairs. They were kids out of universities with freshly minted MBAs running. And I saw that opportunity. When you go look at Silicon Valley, you will see 30, 40 years back that if you could do the job, if you know the science, if you could raise money, the world is wide open. It was not a corporate structure where you had to put in 25 or 30 years. So I think you need both because, without a corporate environment, those young startups had nothing to sell to. Nobody's going to buy you. So you need a combination. Now, I think you see a very healthy of executives leaving big companies to go run startups. And you still see the young entrepreneurs go to big companies for about 5 or 10 years, which was what I did, then come out and start company. And so I think the ecosystem works really well in the entrepreneurial, especially in high tech and in the biotech. I think the traditional industries, they're still, put in your time at big company, but I think people also realize those days of spending 30 years at Kodak or companies that no longer exist, there's no pension. And so once again, go back to the ER, love what you do until you can do what you love. Don't put one foot in, one foot out. And I think people will end up, better for the better when their time comes to transition.
Awesome. And the last word, Quang, is someone reads this book. What is one immediate action you'd like someone to take once they've read it? Like, is there something that, is something actionable after reading your book, reading your story, experiencing what you experience, and they're an underdog? What's one step you'd like someone to take after reading the book?
I think is don't be scared of FOMO. FOMO is fear of missing out. Don't be afraid of it. Embrace it. So the one thing is, whatever you have your dreams of doing, whatever you aspire to be, do it. Don't have FOMO later because you held back because you read something in the news or you don't see a person of your color, of your stature in the higher position. Just go for it.
Awesome. His name is Quang X. Pham. The book, Underdog Nation, zero in on effort and results for success. Quang, thanks so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you. Good to be with you.
And that'll do it for this episode. If you want more information about Quang and our other amazing authors, go to theauthoritycompany.com.